Good morning and welcome to this recorded sermon for Sunday, June 26th, 2025. My name is Bob Malone and I'm the pastor here at Mount Vernon Presbyterian Church in Alexandria, Virginia. And on behalf of our entire congregation, welcome. This morning's scripture lesson comes to us from the 17th chapter of the book of Acts. As always, listen for what God is saying to you today. While Paul was waiting for his friends in Athens, he was deeply distressed to see that the city was full of idols. So he argued in the synagogue with the Jews and the devout persons, and also in the marketplace every day with those who happened to be there. Also, some Epicurean and Stoic philosophers debated with him. Some said, "What does this pretentious babbler want to say?" Others said, "He seems to be a proclaimer of foreign divinities." So they took Paul and brought him to the Areopagus and asked him, "May we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting? It sounds rather strange to us, so we would like to know what it means." Now, all the Athenians and the foreigners living there would spend their time in nothing but telling or hearing something new. So Paul stood in front of the Areopagus and said, "Athenians, I see how extremely spiritual you are in every way. For as I went through the city and looked carefully at the objects of your worship, I found among them an altar with the inscription, 'To an unknown God.' What therefore you worship as unknown, I proclaim to you, the God who made the world and everything in it. He who is Lord of heaven and earth does not live in shrines made by human hands, nor is he served by human hands, as though God needed anything, since he himself gives to all mortals life and breath and all things. From one ancestor he made all people to inhabit the whole earth, and he allotted the times of their existence and the boundaries of the places where they would live, so that they would search for God and perhaps fumble about for him and find him. Though indeed, God is not far from each one of us. For in God we live and move and have our being, even as some of your own poets have said, for we too are God's offspring." Friends, this is the word of the Lord and the poetry of the faithful. Thanks be to God. The who is you. We are called to be the salt of the earth and the light of the world. And that means that reaching out to others, particularly for us here at Mount Vernon, to the young families that the Spirit is bringing our way, that is our challenge. The how is by building relationships. That is where ministry begins and where it ends. It's all about relationships. That's where we've been over this past 2 weeks. And so now this morning, as I wrap up this series titled Missional Incubators, and look at the role of the church in making and growing disciples, I have one final question. And that's the what. We've gone from the who to the how, now to the what. What are we going to do? Last Sunday, I shared what Nicholsville Presbyterian Church in Nicholsville, West Virginia, is doing with Urban Village. And I shared what Union Presbyterian Church in Seattle is doing with cacao. But what about us here in Alexandria? What new and fresh expression of church is the Spirit of God seeking to plant and to grow right here among and within all of us? And to get us thinking about these questions, I'd like us to begin by considering the difference between common space and community space. The difference between common space and community space. Last week, I had lunch with the new pastor at Faith Presbyterian Church, our sister congregation in Southwest D.C. His name is Juan Guthrie. And I was telling him about some of the conversations that we are having here at Mount Vernon. And those were the two terms he raised: common space versus community space. And I think they are perfect for us to think about right now. Because clearly everyone here, whether it is the people who worship here on Sunday morning, or our preschool families, or the families that are in the barn, we all have common space. We're on the very same piece of property on Sherwood Hall Lane. But we don't have community space. And by that, I mean that we don't have space that brings us into contact with one another. Space that allows for collisions so that relationships and ultimately community might be developed. We don't have community space. And that is a serious problem. So if we're going to think about the cultivation or creation of community space, we need to start thinking about what that space might look like. How are we as a congregation going to discern exactly what this community space is going to be? I love that word, discernment. It's Wilda Armstrong's star word for the year. And I actually wonder if it might be our star word as a congregation. Because that is precisely where we are right now. We are in a place of discernment, attempting to listen to what the Spirit is saying to us so that we might determine what we are being called to do. And this is where our reading for the day comes into play. From Acts. This passage reveals something very beautiful, I think, about the heart of Paul. It may be kind of hard to see, but I do think it is there. I will admit that I am one of the first people to say that Paul can be oh so harsh in his letters, primarily because of his patriarchy and his legalism. They can be extremely off-putting to some. But here in Athens, especially when he speaks to the people in the Areopagus, he seems to be a little bit sensitive to the faith of this foreign people. I know the passage tells us that he had spent a good bit of time arguing with them. But when he goes to the Areopagus, he first acknowledges that they are at least a very spiritual people. He knows that because of all the objects of their worship. But then he takes specific notice of that altar to the unknown God. You see, apparently, the Athenians knew that they didn't have the corner on the market of those gods that were worthy of their worship. And Paul appears to recognize that. And it's almost as though he kind of appreciates it. He appreciates their humility. Because what they're basically saying is, hey, if there is another God out there, if there is something else out there that we need to be aware of, well, then we're willing to acknowledge that. We're not so arrogant as to conclude that we know everything. And so, at least for me, I think that the message that we take away from that is that we need to recognize some of those same beliefs among the people around us, especially those who are not in the church. Perhaps they have something to teach us. And perhaps even their unknown God deserves some consideration on our part. In fact, is it possible that their unknown God is the very God that we worship and serve? It may not be a God in the way we know and understand a God, but that's okay. If it's what they worship, then we need to be aware of that, and perhaps we can find some common ground with that. So, as we attempt to discern what this community space is going to look like, what we are being called to create, we would do well to consider what might perhaps be the unknown God of the people around us. That thing for which they are searching, that thing that they are craving and longing for, even though they may not even know what it is, because perhaps it is the very God we are talking about. Without getting way too heady this morning, I would contend that today, God, faith, salvation, they are all about God's love. God's unconditional and unmerited affection that can only be experienced within the context of human relationship, in the context of community. And whether people know that or not, believe that or not, it is what we all need, and it is what we are all longing for in this life. No, it is not good for us to be alone. And that is why the cultivation of community space must be on the agenda of every Christian church today. Because I am more and more convinced that that is the unknown God of the people today. That is what they are looking for, even though they may not even know it, even though it may be unknown to them. It's what everyone needs. It's what everyone longs for. And rather than write it off as not being spiritual enough, or not being a Christian enough, not being Jesus-centered enough, perhaps, like Paul, we can help the people around us see that that is the gospel that we come preaching. That's what Jesus was all about. And that is what our faith and what church is all about. So as we seek to discern what the what is, let me offer a few criteria that I believe to be most important for us. First, whatever we do, it has to look different. It has to be different from all the other religious and churchy stuff that is around us today. Because if that is what people are looking for, and I don't think it is, there are countless other churches within 5 miles of us providing all of it. if you're able to grab your cell phone right now, I encourage you to do it. Type in Mount Vernon Presbyterian Church, just so that you have that on your map app. And then once you're there, search for nearby churches. Take a minute and try to do that on your cell phone. What you will see as you search for churches in our area is that between the Beltway, south of the Beltway, all the way down to the Potomac River, down near the Mount Vernon estate, you will see over 20 dots for churches. 20 plus churches just in that small geographic area. And that doesn't even include the small storefront churches that exist all around us. And you know what? All of those little blue dots, all of those churches, we're all doing pretty much the same thing. All of us. We've got decent buildings. Some might be in pretty poor shape, but like that creaky step on your stairway at home, after a while you get used to it and you don't even know how bad it is. We've all got organs and choirs and pulpits for pastors to preach from. We all serve coffee. It's pretty weak, which is probably why our cups are always so small. And we serve that powdered milk stuff because isn't that what everyone likes? Isn't that what everyone uses at home? Isn't that what Starbucks discovered people want? Powdered milk? So while we like to tout our differences, to the casual observer, to the outsider, we're all pretty much the same. I mean, Good Shepherd and St. Louis Roman Catholic churches, they have communion every week for those who might want communion every week. But we here at Mount Vernon and at Heritage Presbyterian, we only offer it once a month for those who only want it once a month. But to the average unchurched person, what is communion anyway? Aldersgate Methodist Church has a contemporary service in addition to a traditional service, and St. Paul's and Christ Episcopal have a Taizé service once a month for anyone looking for either guitars in worship or a Taizé service in the middle of the week. But to the average unchurched person, what is worship? And exactly what is Taizé? Even though the theology of the churches on your screen right now are all probably very different in terms of praxis, in terms of what we're doing, it's all the exact same thing. We're all offering worship on Sunday morning, Sunday school, Bible study, and maybe a prayer group throughout the week. And we continue to do, all of us, this exact same thing, even though people continue to tell us with their feet that they're really not interested in it. Friends, the first, and if I'm honest, the only thing we need to be looking at right now is that which is different, that which is new, and that which is fresh. Surely there is an unknown God out there for us to consider. And that unknown God has to be more than the judgmental, anti-science, anti-gay, anti-everything God that is being pushed all around us in so many places. When you think of that God that is being pushed and preached today, how can we not understand that something new needs to be offered? We have to change the narrative. We have to help the world see us followers of Jesus as not people who are blinded by our traditions or consumed by the desire for political power, or people that are just downright mean-spirited, and instead people who are seeking to cultivate community. Why, this past week, have so many people become so impressed with the Right Reverend Mary Ann Buddy? Because she's kind and gentle. Because she's so beautifully walking in the footsteps of Jesus. And while she may have her detractors, they are simply not doing any of those things. And the world sees that. At least most do. So all of this is to say that we need to move beyond the norm, beyond the average and the typical. That is our niche as a church. And I hope that doesn't sound in any way conniving or scripted or commercialized, because I don't mean it to. I simply think that it's basic evangelism, giving people what they need, what they're looking for, answering the questions that they are asking, providing what they are searching for, and not continually seeking to operate on our limited agenda. It's about growing community in ways that are attractive and meaningful to others. Friends, most of us are part of this church family because we have found community here. That is the unknown God for which the world is longing today. Community. And perhaps, just perhaps, we might be able to offer them what they're looking for. But we need community space. Next week, I'm moving on in my preaching. This sermon series ends this morning, and there will be new issues put before us. But please, do not put discerning, what huge, radically different, and beautifully transformational thing the Spirit is calling us to do. Do not put it on hold any longer. Don't do it. For over 70 years now, Mount Vernon Presbyterian Church has been a real mission incubator, birthing new ways of reaching out and ministering to the people around us. That is a tradition we want to keep. But it won't happen without our developing community space. So make it your prayer. And make discerning it your goal. For the sake of God's kingdom in this place. Friends, have a great week, and I'll look forward to seeing you right back here next Sunday morning. Until then,